Rain hit the city hard that night. The streets were empty. Most people were already home, warm and safe. But Emily Carter was still at work. She was 26 years old. She worked as a manager at a small design company. Tonight, she stayed late to finish a big project. Her boss needed it by morning, so she sat alone in her office, typing fast, watching the clock. By the time she finished, it was almost 11 p.m. She grabbed her bag, turned off the lights, and walked to the elevator. Her heels clicked on the tile floor. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. She did not know that someone was watching her. His name was Daniel. 6 months ago, he was her boyfriend. Now he was her nightmare. They had dated for almost 2 years. At first he seemed perfect, kind, funny, attentive. But slowly he changed. He wanted to know where she was, every minute. He read her messages. He got angry when she talked to other men, even her own co-workers. When she finally broke up with him, he did not accept it. He called her every day. He sent her long messages, sometimes 10 in a row. He waited outside her apartment. He followed her car. She blocked his number. She changed her locks. She even talked to the police, but they said there was nothing they could do yet. "He hasn't hurt you," the officer said. "Come back if he does something more, something more." Emily hated those words. She felt like she had to wait to get hurt before anyone would help her. Tonight, Daniel had been sitting in his car outside her office building for 2 hours. He watched her window. He saw her light turn off. Now he watched her walk toward the elevator. He smiled to himself. Tonight was the night. He had been planning this for weeks. He knew she parked in the underground garage. He knew the security camera near her car did not work. He had checked many times. Emily stepped into the elevator. She pressed the button for level 2, the parking garage. The doors closed. She looked at her phone. No messages. Good, normal. The elevator doors opened. The garage was dim. Only half the lights worked. Concrete pillars threw long shadows across the floor. Her car was parked near the far corner, close to the exit ramp. She walked fast. Her footsteps were the only sound, until she heard another sound behind her. Slow, careful, someone else's footsteps. She turned around. Nothing. Just shadows and parked cars. She told herself it was nothing. Just her imagination. She kept walking, faster now. Her keys ready in her hand. Then a hand grabbed her arm. She screamed, but the hand covered her mouth before the sound could escape. Daniel pulled her backward, pressing her against a cold concrete pillar. His face was close to hers, his breath heavy. "You didn't think I'd let you go that easy, did you?" He whispered. Emily's heart pounded. She tried to pull away, but he was much stronger. Her bag fell to the ground. Her phone slid across the concrete, out of reach. "Let me go, Daniel," she said, her voice shaking. "Please." "You belong to me," he said. "You always did." Emily's mind raced. She was alone. No cameras. No people, no help. She thought about screaming again, but his hand was still near her mouth. She thought about kicking him, but he had her pinned. For a moment she thought this was really it. This was how her story ended, in a dark parking garage, because a man could not accept that she said no, but someone else was there that night. His name was Marcus Vance. Very few people knew that name well. Fewer still knew what he really did for a living. To most of the city, he was simply a quiet businessman who owned several buildings downtown, including this one. He rarely spoke about his work. He rarely spoke at all. People who knew him understood one thing clearly: do not cross Marcus Vance. He had come to check on a maintenance problem in the garage, something small, a broken light on level 2. He preferred to check these things himself. He trusted very few people, and he liked to see problems with his own eyes. He was walking down the ramp when he heard it, a woman's voice, scared, cut off. Then silence. Marcus stopped walking. He listened. Most men would have called the police first. Most men would have hesitated, unsure what they heard, afraid to get involved. Marcus was not most men. He moved toward the sound without a single sound of his own footsteps. He came around the pillar and saw them. A man pressing a woman against the concrete, one hand over her mouth, the other gripping her arm hard enough to leave a mark. Something cold settled in Marcus's chest. He had seen violence before. He had caused some of it himself in another life for other reasons. But this, a man hurting a woman who could not defend herself, this was different. This made something old and dangerous wake up inside him. He did not shout a warning. He did not ask questions. Daniel felt it before he saw it, a presence behind him, silent as a shadow. He turned his head just as a hand closed around his wrist, the one covering Emily's mouth. The grip was like iron. "Let her go," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, almost calm. But something underneath it made Daniel's blood run cold. Daniel released Emily and spun around, ready to fight. He was tall, strong, confident. He had never lost a fight in his life. He looked at Marcus, and for the first time that night felt real fear. Emily stumbled back against the pillar, gasping for air, her whole body shaking. She looked at the man who had just saved her, tall, dressed simply in a dark coat, his face calm, but his eyes sharp as knives. She did not know his name yet. She did not know that this one moment, this one night in a parking garage, would change the entire course of her life. She only knew one thing for certain. Daniel had finally gone too far, and the quiet man standing between them was not someone who forgave easily. Daniel did not move. He stared at the stranger in front of him, trying to understand what was happening. A moment ago he had control. Now everything felt wrong. "This isn't your business," Daniel said, his voice louder than before, trying to sound brave. "Walk away." Marcus did not answer right away. He looked at Daniel the way a person looks at a small problem that needs to be handled quietly. No anger on his face, no fear either. Just a cold, steady focus that made Daniel's stomach twist. "You put your hands on her," Marcus said. "That made it my business." Behind him, Emily was still breathing hard, her back against the pillar. Her legs felt weak. She wanted to run, but she could not make herself move. She watched the two men, unsure what would happen next. Daniel decided to fight. He threw a punch fast and hard, aimed at Marcus's jaw. Marcus moved his head slightly to the side. The punch missed by inches. Before Daniel could react, Marcus grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back in one smooth motion. Daniel cried out in pain and dropped to one knee. "You don't want to do this," Marcus said quietly. "Trust me." Daniel struggled, but the grip only tightened. Pain shot through his shoulder. He had never felt so powerless in his life. Who are you?" Daniel gasped. Marcus did not answer. He looked over at Emily instead. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice suddenly softer. Emily shook her head, though her arm throbbed where Daniel had grabbed her. "No, I'm okay," she said, her voice shaking. Marcus nodded once. Then he looked down at Daniel, still bent over in pain. "I'm going to let you go," Marcus said. "And you are going to leave this building. If I ever see you near her again, this conversation will not end the same way." He released Daniel's arm. Daniel stumbled back, holding his shoulder, glaring at Marcus with hate in his eyes. He looked at Emily too, and for a second, his old anger returned to his face. "This isn't over," Daniel said. "It is tonight," Marcus said calmly. Daniel hesitated, weighing his options. He was strong, but he was not stupid. He knew he could not win this fight. He turned and walked quickly toward the exit stairs, disappearing into the shadows of the garage. For a moment, neither Emily nor Marcus said anything. The garage was silent again, except for the sound of rain outside and Emily's shaky breathing. "You should sit down," Marcus said. Noticing how pale she looked, Emily nodded weakly and slid down against the pillar until she was sitting on the cold concrete floor. Marcus crouched down near her, keeping a careful distance, not wanting to scare her further. "I'm calling someone to check on you," he said, pulling out his phone. "And the police, if you want." No police," Emily said quickly. Her voice cracked. "They won't do anything." "They never do." Marcus studied her face for a moment. He had seen that look before, the look of someone who had asked for help many times and received none. He did not push the subject. Instead, he simply nodded. "Okay," he said. "No police." "But you're not driving home alone tonight." Emily looked up at him, confused. "Who are you?" she asked. "Why were you even down here?" I own this building, Marcus said simply. I was checking on a light that's been out for a week. Lucky timing, I suppose. Emily let out a shaky laugh, though tears were forming in her eyes. Lucky for me, she said quietly. Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a small bottle of water he had been carrying. He handed it to her without a word. Emily took it, her hands still trembling, and drank slowly. Thank you, she whispered. If you hadn't come, don't think about that, Marcus said. Think about what happens now. Emily wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. He's my ex-boyfriend, she said. Daniel. We broke up 6 months ago, but he won't stop. He follows me. He calls me. He waits outside my apartment. I've tried everything, the police, lawyers, changing my number. Nothing works. Marcus listened carefully, his jaw tightening slightly as she spoke. He said nothing for a moment, thinking. He's done this before, he asked. Followed you? Grabbed you? Not like this, Emily said. Not this bad, but he's getting worse. Every week he gets a little more angry, a little more desperate. Marcus nodded slowly. In his mind, a plan was already forming, quiet, careful, and very different from anything the police would ever do. I want you to give me his full name, Marcus said, and anything else you know about him. Where he works, what he drives, where he lives. Emily blinked, surprised. Why? Because men like that don't stop on their own, Marcus said. They stop when they're made to stop. Something in his voice sent a small chill down Emily's spine, not fear of him, but a strange kind of relief. For the first time in 6 months, she felt like someone was actually going to do something. You don't even know me, she said softly. I know enough, Marcus said. I know what I saw tonight. That's enough for now. He stood up and offered his hand to help her to her feet. She hesitated for just a moment before taking it. His grip was firm but gentle, steady in a way that made her feel, for the first time in a long while, a little bit safe. Come on, Marcus said. I'll walk you to your car. And tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to hear the whole story. Everything about Daniel. Emily nodded slowly, still shaken but no longer alone in the fear. As they walked together across the quiet garage, she glanced at Marcus from the corner of her eye. There was something different about him, something calm on the surface, but with a quiet strength underneath, like still water hiding something much deeper below. She did not know yet who Marcus Vance really was, or what kind of world he came from. She did not know that behind his calm voice and quiet manner was a man capable of very dangerous things. She only knew that tonight. A stranger had appeared out of nowhere and saved her life, and somehow she felt certain this was only the beginning. Emily did not sleep much that night. Marcus had walked her to her car, waited until she started the engine, and then followed her in his own vehicle all the way to her apartment building. He did not come inside. He simply parked outside, watched until she reached her door safely, and then drove away. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in her mind. The hand over her mouth, the fear. And then, just as quickly, the stranger who appeared like a shadow and stopped it all without raising his voice. Marcus Vance. She said the name quietly to herself in the dark room. Who was he really? The next morning, she got a text message from an unknown number. This is Marcus. I got your number from the building's tenant list. Are you all right? Emily stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. I'm okay. Still shaking a little, but okay. Thank you again. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't there. You don't have to think about that, he replied. Can we talk today? I'd like to hear more about Daniel if you're willing. She agreed to meet him that afternoon at a small coffee shop near her office. She told herself it was simply to say a proper thank you, but part of her was also curious about the calm, quiet man who had appeared out of nowhere and handled a dangerous situation like it was nothing. When she arrived at the coffee shop, Marcus was already there, sitting at a corner table facing the door. He stood briefly when she approached, a small gesture of respect that surprised her. You look better than last night, he said as she sat down. I feel a little better, Emily admitted. Still scared, honestly, but better. A waitress came by and Marcus ordered 2 coffees without asking what Emily wanted first, then quickly corrected himself. "Sorry, old habit. What would you like instead?" Emily almost smiled. "Coffee is fine, actually." For a few minutes, they sat in comfortable silence while the coffee arrived. Then Marcus leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "Tell me everything," he said. "About Daniel." From the beginning, Emily took a deep breath and began. She told him about how she met Daniel 3 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. How charming he had been at first, how attentive, how he made her feel special, like she was the only person in the room. "It didn't happen all at once," she explained. "It was small things first. He'd get upset if I didn't answer his texts fast enough. Then he started checking my phone when I wasn't looking. Then he didn't like me hanging out with my friends without him." Marcus listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on her, taking in every word. "By the time I realized how bad it had gotten, I felt trapped," Emily continued. "He controlled a lot of my life without me even noticing. When I finally broke up with him, he didn't accept it. He said I belonged to him. He said no one else would ever understand me the way he did." "And after the breakup?" Marcus asked. "It got worse," Emily said, her voice growing tighter. "He showed up outside my apartment. He called me from different numbers when I blocked him. He sent flowers to my office with notes that scared me more than comforted me. Once I found him sitting in his car outside my building at 3 in the morning, just watching my window." "Did you report that to the police?" Marcus asked. Emily let out a bitter laugh. "I did, multiple times. They took a report. They said they'd talk to him. Nothing changed. One officer even told me maybe I should just talk to Daniel myself, work things out like adults." She shook her head. "Like I hadn't already tried that 100 times. Marcus's jaw tightened, a flash of something dark crossing his eyes before disappearing again. "The system fails people like you far too often," he said quietly. "It waits for something terrible to happen before it takes anyone seriously." "That's exactly how it feels," Emily said. "Like I have to get hurt badly enough before anyone cares." Marcus was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "I don't wait for the system." Emily looked up at him, confused. "What does that mean?" Marcus considered his words carefully. "I run several businesses in this city," he said. "Real estate mostly on the surface. But I also have other resources, people who work for me, people who can find information, watch someone, make sure a person doesn't cause any more harm." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "Are you saying you want to have him watched?" "I'm saying men like Daniel don't stop because someone asks nicely," Marcus said. "They don't stop because of a restraining order that takes weeks to process. They stop when they understand, clearly and permanently, that their actions have real consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Emily asked carefully. Marcus met her eyes. "That depends on what happens next. I'm not going to lie to you about what I do or pretend to be someone I'm not. But I can promise you this, as long as I'm involved, Daniel will never get close enough to hurt you again." Emily sat back in her chair, studying him. Part of her felt afraid of what he was suggesting, unsure what other resources really meant. But another part of her, the exhausted, terrified part that had spent 6 months looking over her shoulder, felt something close to hope. "Why would you do this?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant, as if remembering something from long ago. "Because I know what it looks like when someone is truly powerless," he said finally. "And I've decided a long time ago that when I have the power to stop it, I will." There was something in his voice, a weight, a history, that told Emily there was much more behind those words than he was willing to share yet. She did not know it then. But Marcus Vance carried his own past, full of loss and violence, reasons that had shaped him into the man sitting across from her now. A man who owned buildings by day and moved through a much darker world by night, a world where questions were rarely asked, and problems simply disappeared. "Okay," Emily said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well, what do we do?" Marcus's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened, focused, like a predator locking onto a target. "We start," he said, by finding out everything there is to know about Daniel. Marcus did not waste time. By the next evening, he had a folder on the table between them. Daniel's full name, his workplace, his home address, his daily routine, even the make and model of his car. Emily stared at it, stunned. "How did you get all this so fast?" she asked. "I have people who are very good at finding information," Marcus said simply, not offering further explanation. Daniel Reyes, 28 years old, works as a sales manager at a car dealership downtown. Lives alone in an apartment 15 minutes from your building. No criminal record. Yet, Emily flipped through the papers with shaking hands. Seeing Daniel's life laid out so clearly, so completely, felt strange. Almost like she finally had power over him, after months of feeling like he held all the power over her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we watch him," Marcus said
quietly.
"We learn his patterns. We make sure he understands he's being watched, without him knowing exactly how or by whom. Men like this feed on feeling powerful, feeling like they're in control. When that control disappears, they either back off completely or they escalate. Escalate how?" Emily asked, her stomach tightening. "Some men get angrier when they feel out of control," Marcus said honestly. "That's why we need to be careful. I have someone watching your apartment starting tonight. Another person will monitor Daniel's movements. If he comes near you again, we will know before you do." Emily felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that she was not facing this alone anymore. Fear of exactly how far Marcus was willing to go and what that meant for both of them. Over the next few days, Emily noticed small changes. A car she didn't recognize parked quietly down the street from her building each night. A man who nodded politely to her in the lobby, always somewhere nearby but never intrusive. She never spoke to these people directly, but she understood they were there because of Marcus. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed to disappear for a while. No calls, no messages, no car outside her window. For the first time in months, Emily slept through the night without waking up in fear every time she heard a sound outside. She met Marcus again a week later, this time at his office, a tall glass building downtown that she had passed 100 times without ever knowing he owned it. His office was simple, clean, almost empty of personal items, except for one framed photograph on his desk of a young woman smiling brightly. Emily glanced at it, but did not ask. Something about the sadness behind his eyes when he noticed her looking told her not to. "Daniel has been quiet," Marcus said, getting straight to business. "But quiet doesn't always mean gone. Sometimes it means planning. Do you think he'll try something again?" Emily asked. "I think a man like Daniel doesn't let go easily," Marcus said. "He's been humiliated. In his mind, that makes him more dangerous, not less." Emily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm office. "So what do we do? Just wait?" "No," Marcus said. "We stay one step ahead of him." He explained his plan carefully. His people would continue watching Daniel's movements, learning his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. If Daniel made any move toward Emily, any at all, Marcus would know within minutes. "And if he does?" Emily asked. "What happens to him?" Marcus's expression remained calm, but his eyes told a different story. "That depends on what he does," he said. "But I promise you this. He will never lay a hand on you again." There was something absolute in the way he said it, something that left no room for doubt. Emily believed him completely, even though she still did not fully understand who Marcus really was, or the world he moved through when he wasn't managing office buildings and rental properties. Over the following 2 weeks, Emily and Marcus began seeing more of each other, not just for updates on Daniel, but simply to talk. He drove her home from work sometimes. He asked about her day, her job, her dreams for the future. Slowly, carefully, Emily found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone in a long time. She learned small things about him too. That he had grown up in a rough part of the city. That he had lost someone important to him years ago, though he never explained exactly who or how. that underneath his cold, controlled exterior was a man who felt things deeply, perhaps too deeply, which was part of why he kept himself so guarded. One evening, as he dropped her off outside her apartment, Emily turned to him before getting out of the car. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why does this matter so much to you?" she asked. "Protecting me, I mean. You didn't have to get involved. You didn't have to do any of this." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the windshield at the rain beginning to fall again. "Someone I loved once needed help," he said finally. "And I wasn't there in time." Emily's chest tightened at the pain in his voice. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," Marcus said. "It's why I do what I do now. It's why I couldn't just walk past that night in the garage." He turned to look at her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. "Some things you don't get a second chance to fix. This is my second chance." Emily did not know what to say. She simply reached over and placed her hand gently on his. He looked down at her hand, then back up at her face, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. Neither of them noticed the car parked across the street. Engine off, headlights dark, Daniel sitting quietly in the shadows, watching them together with growing rage building inside his chest. He had been watching for days, staying carefully out of sight of Marcus's men, learning their patterns just as they had learned his, and what he saw that night. Emily's hand on another man's sent something inside him snapping completely. Daniel had not been idle during those quiet 2 weeks. While Marcus's people watched his apartment, his car, his usual routes to work, Daniel had quietly changed his patterns. He borrowed a friend's car. He stopped using his phone for anything important. He had noticed the man who sat in a parked car near his building each night, and slowly, carefully, he learned how to slip past him unnoticed. He was not as careless as Marcus believed. Every night for the past week, Daniel found a way to watch Emily's apartment from a distance, using a rented car, parking in different spots each time, so no pattern could be traced. He watched her leave for work. He watched her come home. And 3 nights ago, he had watched Marcus walk her to her door for the first time. Something inside him had been slowly boiling since that moment in the parking garage. The humiliation of being overpowered, of being told to leave like a misbehaving child. But watching Emily lean close to another man, watching her place her hand gently over his, that boiling anger became something colder, sharper, something dangerous. She was supposed to be mine, he thought, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. She will always be mine. He began planning more carefully this time. No more mistakes, no more being caught off guard by some stranger who thought he could just step into other people's business. Daniel spent the next several days learning everything he could about Marcus. Vance. He discovered the office building downtown. He discovered the name on public records for several other properties across the city. Marcus was careful, but not invisible. Nobody with that much money and that much reach could stay completely hidden if someone dug hard enough. What Daniel could not find was the truth beneath the surface. The resources, the darker world Marcus moved through, the reason powerful and dangerous men in this city knew better than to cross him. Daniel saw only a wealthy businessman who had taken his woman. He underestimated everything else. Meanwhile, Emily's life had slowly begun to feel normal again. She returned to her usual routines at work. She started sleeping through the night without nightmares. She even laughed again, something she had almost forgotten how to do over the past 6 months. She and Marcus had grown close, closer than either of them had expected. What started as protection had slowly turned into something neither of them could quite name yet. Long conversations that stretched late into the night, quiet dinners at his apartment, moments of comfortable silence that somehow felt more meaningful than words. "You seem different today," Marcus said one evening. As they sat together on his balcony, city lights spread out below them. "I feel different," Emily admitted. "For the first time in months, I don't feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder." Marcus studied her face carefully. "Good," he said softly. "That's exactly how you should feel." She smiled and looked out at the city. "I owe you so much, Marcus. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't owe me anything," he said. "I told you. This is something I needed to do, for my own reasons." Emily turned to face him fully. "The person you lost," she said gently.
Do you want to talk about her?
Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but he did not look away. "Her name was Sarah," he said quietly. "My younger sister. She had a boyfriend years ago, very similar to Daniel. Controlling, possessive, dangerous, though none of us realized how dangerous until it was too late." Emily's heart ached at the pain in his voice. "What happened?" "I was traveling for work when it happened," Marcus said, his voice flat, controlled. The way people speak, when they've told a painful story so many times, they've learned to protect themselves from feeling it fully. "She called me scared, saying he wouldn't leave her alone. I told her I'd be back in 2 days, that we'd figure it out together." He paused. "She didn't have 2 days." Emily reached over and took his hand, saying nothing, simply letting him know she was there. "After that," Marcus continued, "I promised myself I would never again be the person who arrived too late. I built resources, connections, ways to protect people who couldn't protect themselves when the system failed them the way it failed my sister." He looked at Emily then, his eyes intense. "The night I found you in that garage, some part of me thought about her immediately. I couldn't let it happen again." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. She understood now, completely, why this mattered so much to him. It wasn't just protection. It was redemption for a wound that had never fully healed. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she whispered. Marcus reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Neither of them noticed the shadow moving along the street below, or the pair of eyes watching them from the darkness. Daniel, who had followed Emily to Marcus's building that evening, standing across the street, watching the 2 figures on the balcony above, his hands trembled with rage. His mind spun with dark, twisted plans, each one more desperate than the last. "If I can't have her," he thought, his eyes narrowing, "no one will." He turned and walked back to his car, already forming the beginning of a plan that would put everything and everyone in terrible danger. 3 days passed in quiet peace. Emily began to believe cautiously that the worst was truly behind her. She did not know that Daniel had spent those 3 days planning something far more dangerous than anything he had tried before. He had studied Emily's schedule carefully. He knew she stayed late at the office every Thursday, working on weekly reports. He knew that Marcus usually picked her up around 9 after finishing his own work downtown. He knew, too, that the security guard at Emily's office building took his dinner break at 8:30, leaving the lobby unattended for exactly 20 minutes. 20 minutes was more than enough. Daniel had also done something else over those 3 days, something reckless, something that revealed just how far his desperation had pushed him. He had reached out to a man he knew from years ago, someone he had met briefly through a friend of a friend, someone with a reputation for being willing to do dangerous things for the right price. Daniel did not know this man's real name. He only knew he called himself Reeves, and that Reeves had access to things ordinary people did not, including a gun. "I just need to scare her," Daniel had told him, though even as he said the words, he knew he was lying to himself. "Get her away from him for one night. That's all." Reeves had simply nodded, taken the money, and asked no questions. Thursday evening arrived. Emily worked later than usual, finishing her weekly report just after 8. She texted Marcus that she was running behind, and he replied that he would come get her at 9:15 instead. At 8:30, exactly as Daniel predicted, the security guard left his desk for his dinner break. The lobby doors, normally locked after 8, had a faulty sensor that sometimes failed to latch completely, something Daniel had tested and confirmed 3 separate times over the past week. Daniel slipped through the doors silently, Reeves following close behind him. They made their way to the stairwell, avoiding the elevator and its cameras. Climbing up to the 3rd floor, where Emily's office was located, Emily, unaware of anything happening around her, sat at her desk, finishing the last few lines of her report. The office around her was empty and quiet, most of her co-workers having left hours ago. She glanced at the clock, 8:45. Only 30 more minutes until Marcus arrived. She did not hear the stairwell door open quietly down the hall. Daniel moved carefully, familiar with the office layout from the few times he had visited Emily here during their relationship. He knew exactly where her desk was located, near the back corner by the windows. Reeves stayed a few steps behind, uneasy despite his experience. Something about this job felt different from his usual work, more personal, more emotional, which usually meant more unpredictable. Emily finished typing the final sentence of her report and hit save, letting out a tired breath. She reached for her phone to check the time again. That's when she heard it, a soft footstep on the office carpet. Far too close for comfort, she spun around in her chair, and her blood ran cold. Daniel stood just a few feet away, watching her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not anger, not desperation, but something worse. A terrifying calm, like a man who had already decided something and made peace with it. "Hello, Emily," he said quietly. "Daniel," Emily's voice caught in her throat. She glanced past him and saw the second man standing near the doorway, blocking her only exit. Her heart began pounding wildly. "How did you get in here?" "That doesn't matter," Daniel said, taking a slow step closer. "What matters is that we're finally going to talk. Really talk. No interruptions this time. No knight in shining armor to save you." Emily's hand instinctively moved toward her desk phone, but Daniel was faster. He reached across and yanked the cord from the wall before she could touch it. "Don't," he warned. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Emily's mind raced desperately. Her cell phone was in her bag, just a few feet away on the floor, but Daniel stood between her and it. She thought about screaming, but the office building was mostly empty at this hour, and Daniel's friend by the door looked more than capable of stopping her before help arrived. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear rushing through her. "I want you to understand something," Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to just replace me. You don't get to move on like none of this mattered, like I meant nothing. Especially not with him. This has nothing to do with Marcus," Emily said carefully. "This is about you and me, and it ended a long time ago. It's not over until I say it's over." Daniel's calm suddenly cracked, his voice rising sharply. Reeves shifted uncomfortably by the door, clearly unprepared for this level of emotion. Emily flinched at the sudden change, her fear spiking. She glanced quickly toward the window, calculating distances, exits, anything that might give her a chance. Daniel noticed her glance and stepped closer, blocking her view completely. "Don't even think about it," he said. "You're coming with me tonight. We're going to go somewhere quiet, somewhere we can finally talk without anyone interrupting us." "And if I refuse?" Emily asked, though her voice trembled. Daniel's eyes darkened. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that made Emily's breath catch completely in her throat. A small, cold metal object that glinted under the office lights. "A gun." "Then I stop asking," Daniel said quietly. "Reeves." Seeing the weapon appear, immediately stiffened by the door. This was far beyond what he had agreed to. But before he could say anything, before he could step back or object, his phone buzzed sharply in his pocket, an alert he had set up himself, one that monitored certain frequencies near his equipment. Someone was jamming their cell signals. Someone already knew they were here. Outside the building, in the shadows of the parking lot, Marcus sat in his car, his phone screen glowing softly in the darkness. A message from his security team blinked across the screen. "Unauthorized entry detected. 3rd floor. Emily's office." 2 individuals. Marcus's expression went cold and still, the calm mask slipping away completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. He was out of the car and moving before the message even finished loading. Marcus moved through the parking lot fast, his heart pounding, but his mind sharp and focused. Years of training, years of discipline, all of it narrowed down to this single moment. Emily was in danger, and every second mattered. He reached the lobby doors and found them unlocked, just as his security team had reported. The guard's desk was empty, the dinner break exactly as Daniel had planned. Marcus moved past it without hesitation, heading straight for the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time in complete silence. His phone buzzed once more against his palm. A short message from his team: backup 4 minutes out. Police notified. 4 minutes felt like forever. Inside the office, Emily stared at the gun in Daniel's hand, her whole body frozen with fear. Reeves stood near the doorway, clearly regretting every decision that had brought him to this moment, his eyes darting nervously toward the exit. "Daniel, please," Emily said, her voice trembling but steady enough to keep talking. "Think about what you're doing. This isn't who you are. You don't know who I am anymore." Daniel snapped, his hand shaking slightly as he gripped the weapon. "You never gave me the chance to show you I could change. People don't change by pointing guns at each other," Emily said carefully, trying to buy time, trying to keep him talking instead of acting. Daniel's face twisted with a mixture of anger and something close to grief. "I loved you," he said, his voice cracking. "I still do. Why couldn't that be enough?" "Love isn't supposed to feel like this," Emily said softly. "It isn't supposed to be about control, about fear. What you're doing right now, this isn't love, Daniel. It never was." For a brief moment, something flickered across Daniel's face. Doubt, maybe even regret. His hand wavered slightly. That was when the office door burst open. Marcus entered without hesitation, his eyes immediately locking onto the gun in Daniel's hand. Everything in the room seemed to freeze for a split second. "Let her go, Daniel," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled, though every muscle in his body was coiled and ready. "This ends now, one way or another." Daniel spun around, startled, swinging the gun toward Marcus.
Stay back.
He shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "I mean it! Stay back or I'll—" "You won't," Marcus said calmly, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "Because deep down, you're not a killer, Daniel. You're just a scared man who doesn't know how to let go. Shut up." Daniel shouted, his hand shaking harder now, the gun wavering between Marcus and Emily. Reeves, seeing the situation spiraling completely out of control, made his decision. He was a professional who took jobs for money, not madness. This was no longer worth any amount of money. He slipped quietly out the door and disappeared down the stairwell, abandoning Daniel completely. Daniel did not notice him leave. His attention, his entire world, had narrowed down to Marcus and Emily. "You took her from me," Daniel said, tears now mixing with the anger in his eyes. "You had no right." "She was never yours to take," Marcus said steadily. "She was never anyone's possession, Daniel. That's something you never understood." Daniel's hand tightened on the gun, his knuckles white. Emily watched in terror, unable to move, unable to speak, praying silently that this moment would not end in tragedy. "Daniel," Marcus said, his voice softening slightly, though his eyes remained sharp and watchful. "Put the gun down. Nobody else has to get hurt tonight. You can still walk away from this and go where?" Daniel said bitterly. "Prison? I've lost everything already." "You haven't lost your life," Marcus said. "Not yet. But if you pull that trigger, that changes forever. Is that really what you want?" Daniel's chest heaved with ragged breaths, his mind a chaotic storm of anger, grief, and fading resolve. For a long, tense moment, nobody in the room moved. Then slowly, painfully, Daniel's arm began to lower. The gun slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. He sank to his knees, his whole body shaking with quiet, broken sobs. The weight of everything finally crashing down on him at once. Emily let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like an eternity, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. Marcus moved quickly to her side, kicking the fallen gun safely out of reach before wrapping his arms around her protectively. "It's over," he said quietly, holding her close. "You're safe now." Emily buried her face against his chest, finally allowing herself to cry, months of fear and exhaustion pouring out all at once. Minutes later, The police arrived, followed closely by two of Marcus's own security team. Daniel was arrested on the spot, charged with breaking and entering, unlawful imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon. This time, there would be no report filed and forgotten. This time, there was a weapon, witnesses, and undeniable evidence. This time, justice would not look away. In the weeks that followed, Daniel was formally charged and held without bail, considered too dangerous for release. Emily testified against him, her voice steady, despite the fear still lingering beneath the surface. With Marcus by her side throughout the entire process, she found a strength she never knew she had. Slowly, life began to rebuild itself. Emily returned to her work, though she eventually moved to a different office, a fresh start away from painful memories. She and Marcus grew closer with each passing day. Their bond forged in fear, but strengthened through trust, patience and genuine care. One evening, months later, they sat together on his balcony once more. The same city lights spread out beneath them. "Do you ever think about that night in the garage?" Emily asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "Every day," he admitted. "It's the night everything changed. For both of us," Emily said softly. Resting her head against his shoulder, Marcus wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer, a rare, genuine smile crossing his face. "I used to think I was too late to save the people who mattered most," he said quietly. "That night I finally wasn't." Emily smiled up at him, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude and something deeper, something that had grown slowly but surely over the past few months. "You saved me," she said, "in more ways than one." "We saved each other," Marcus said gently. Below them, the city continued its endless motion, indifferent to the quiet moment shared high above its streets. But for Emily and Marcus, the world finally felt still, safe and full of possibility, a future neither of them had expected, born from the darkest night of their lives.